the first of the transistorized computers were coming out, and I was one of the bright kids in the company, and they sent me on a computer course on how to fix these things. And I loved it. Gee, I really, the logic of how these things work on the inside, I mean, that struck a chord with me. I enjoyed working on that machine. Yeah, it was always a challenge. It was difficult. It was new. It was cutting-edge stuff. The machine eventually got replaced, and it went to University of Cape Town. And I went with it, basically. And for a couple of years there, looked after that machine. And then eventually Rhodes University decided it wanted a computer also. Next step was to get international email. There's no question that was necessary. Now in 1988, George Bush I think it was, persuaded US Congress to pass the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act. And that virtually isolated South Africa. There were escape clauses in there about academic. They were not part of the sanctions that were in place, but there were bodies that dealt, my name particularly dealt with Rhodes, was a package called SPSS, Statistical Package for Social Scientists. And at Rhodes we had staff using those packages. When you're talking about the academics, now there were 500,000 students at our universities in those days, and here we've got Telkom getting in the way of those folk advancing their knowledge and of leaving the universities with networking knowledge, and they're going to go into industry and into commerce and say, hey, where's the network? Better get hold of Telkom and you better order the circuits. You know, I mean, Telkom, there was business that they could have had, and I just had no vision. I have no idea what went on in the mentality of Telkom. But really, I'd always hoped that we would have had full cooperation and whatever. It didn't work. And I don't believe they could have seen us as competition, because they weren't in the business of providing very much to academics. They did start to run a program through the computer science departments of centers of excellence. Very good that they did that. But in terms of supporting internet access for our academics and for our students, for our researchers of this country, studying the homeland's economy and analyzing it with that package. And SPSS pulled the plug on it. They said, not renewing the license, because it also sold to places like Berkeley, University of Berkeley, California. And the students would riot if they realized that that package was being used in South Africa. Well, that I think was the fear. That was our view as the reason as to why they cut the package. So now we've got to try to find a way to get international email in that environment. And quite apart from that environment, we've got an environment with the government saying, hey, no one talks about the riots in Soweto. No one talks about the riots in Uitenhage. Communication blackout. They banned weekly mail arbitrarily. Stoffel Botha just came along and said, you are banned. No trial, nothing, you may not publish. And there were a couple of other publications that just, booms, banned. Now we're in that environment, and we want to get international email. I wrote to an outfit called BitNet. Now, the protocols we were using from the cyber to the IBMs and to the VACs in physics were the protocols of the network called BitNet. And we got to just plug straight into BitNet. A technical level would have worked. So bold as can be, one letter to BitNet and get back a very nice letter that says, you're welcome to join. So take us to the Uninet board meeting saying, there we are guys, we're in. If someone will give us a 9600 bits per second line from Rhodes University to New York or wherever it was going to be in the USA, we're in international email. And so the wise men of the Uninet board look at this lot and say, Mike, you're naive. You're dealing with a technical person. The politics of BitNet is that they are in close association with EARN, the European Academic Research Network, and countries like Denmark and Scandinavians, they're going to say immediately, ban, no go, can't connect. So I got back to Grahamstown after the meeting, cheesed off as can be, because the letter didn't say that at all. It said you can connect. And I found the lady who had written to me, a lady called Elizabeth Kilcoyne. I found her phone number and I spoke to her and I raised these very issues. You know, well, are you quite sure you're dealing with South Africa, the South Africa, not just a country somewhere in southern part of Africa? She said, no, it's quite clear you can connect. And no one would believe me. Oh, was I cross? I was cross. I said, never again do I go to a committee to ask for permission. Never again. It's easier to get forgiveness, they say, than to get permission. There were other networks, academic networks of that era. NSFNet was the big one. And the internet protocols ran on NSFNet. And the development, the evolution of it took place on NSFNet. So the TCP/IP stuff, the internet protocol development and expansion, that sort of stuff, was on NSFNet, which had commands embedded in them which caused other computers to do other things. So mail was a big issue. So in about, I think about 87 or so, there was now this move at Uninet to look for an international mail gateway. Declined going for BitNet, and Mike Lawrie says we're going on our own. Pat Terry comes back, not only with the latest FiberNet software, but with someone who's going to act as a gateway that works. So this is great. So we set this up, and Randy says, look, but hang on, FiberNet's got rules. And if he's going to be a zone gate for South Africa, it's got to be for South Africa, it's not just for Rhodes University. So all the other FiberNetters in South Africa would have to switch from using what is registered as the gateway in the Netherlands to using the gateway now at Randy Bush. Easy, like the FiberNetters and say, guys, I've got you free transfers. They're going to cost you nothing. What you'll do is to dial Rhodes University, your stuff will go. Was there an outcry? My word, there was an outcry. An anti-outcry. No ways, you guys are taking over, you're doing this, you're doing that. Oh, it took quite a bit of diplomacy, and I'm not good at diplomacy, it's not my forte, to actually say, guys, but it's going to be for free, and it's going to work, and it's this, that, and other, and try it out, and eventually everyone was happy. I think they were very happy indeed, because they didn't have to make calls to Holland, they just had to make calls to Grahamstown, and whoops, we would forward it. So the FiberNet worked. We grew up from one PC in South Africa to my mailbox at the University of Delaware, and we could come back. But that's no good, because we got the cyber. So we tack onto the cyber's gateway system, mail system, a little bit of code that says, if the email's got an international address, put it in a file, spool it, use Kermit to transfer it into this PC, manipulate it on the PC to make it look as though someone has just typed it in and sent it to Randy. And when it comes back, do exactly the same thing. And my word, this wretched thing worked. And so now, quite a lot of the guys in physics sending international email, the guys in, if we opened the gateway, okay, there was a political aspect now, it wasn't a technical aspect, but anyone who could send mail as far as Rhodes University could send international mail. And one thing led to another, and letters were written, and statements were made, and eventually that gateway got open to all the universities. We changed our international gateway to be using UUCP rather than FiberNet, because UUCP had standards that are much closer to internet standards, and that improved reliability enormously, but it was still dial-up. Talking about 1990, end of 1990, most of 1991. During that period, where we'd now shown quite clearly that TCP/IP ran in South Africa, we had interest from the other universities, some of the universities. So we said, well, let's put together a course, and rather than handing one phone call and then another phone call with the same question, and we actually trying to do other things, quite apart from doing our jobs, let's organize a course. So we organize a course. pitched at the universities on how to connect their stuff to TCP/IP, what they need to know, what they need to do, and I don't know, about 10 people pitched up. Now, Alan Barrett and Chris Pinkham were part of the course giving, and Jacko and Dave and myself. There were folk there from Potch, there were folk from UPE. I have a list somewhere, but it was a fun thing. We ran for about 3 days, and it then helped. You know, those who didn't want to connect with TCP/IP, that was fine. Those who did, we'll hope to show you. But let's try to be efficient in that showing. We then, now that must have been about 1990, 91, that era. At the end of 91, sanctions had lifted such that we could now join directly into NSFnet. Now, NSF had a international liaison guy, a chap called Steve Goldstein, and he was very helpful in helping us to get connected. And in February 94, I took over as Uninet manager. Now, by then Unit's a TCP/IP network, we've got Cisco routers and things are running nicely, except the cost is horrendous. Those circuits cost a bundle, the universities could not afford them. And this from 94 to the year 2000, for 6 years. Well, the initial granting of domain, of administrative rights, there's no concept of ownership of a domain. There's only obligations and responsibilities. But when that was granted in that letter from Vince Cerf, it was to Rhodes University. And I wrote back and said, no, hang on, Rhodes doesn't want to do this. It's got to be done through Uninet, and that was fine. There was no difficulty. So Vic Shaw became the administrator of ZA. The only folk using internet were academics and researchers. So we set up the ACZA domain.